Paris Connection is not a game that has received a lot of attention, it seems to me. I had never heard of it until I pretty much purchased it on a sale on Amazon. They were selling Queen games at very cheap prices, and I got this one for like less than $10 or something ridiculous like that. And also, it doesn't look like the page of the game on Board Game Geek has had a lot of traffic recently or ever. Paris Connection is a simple game that I was hoping would be good per se, of course, otherwise I wouldn't have purchased it. And I was also hoping that it could be a good gateway game, because as you can imagine, I'm always trying to involve new people into this wonderful hobby of ours. And every time that I play games with new players that have not played hobby games, of course I fall back onto the usual Pandemic, Ticket to Ride, Carcassonne. And I got to a point where I need some variety myself. There are only so many times that I can play Pandemic and still be excited about it. Although now with Pandemic Iberia, that has sort of like rebooted my interest, which never really wavered. It's just a matter of like I played that game so many times. Again, point being, if I can have one more gateway game in my collection, one more type of ammo in that department, that would be great. So I was really hoping that Paris Connection would be pleasurable per se and also good as a gateway game, because from what I understood it seemed to be fairly simple, fairly linear, good and nice looking. So it seemed to have all of the good attributes that we're looking for in a good gateway game. Let me show how the game works, and then we'll come back here and we'll talk about the game in general and whether or not this could be used as a good gateway game. This is the board of the game, which looks really nice, clean and functional, and what you see here is setup, at least setup on the board. You will place 6 trains there around Paris, 6 trains of 6 different colors, so trains such as this one, and then from there you will build a railroad in different directions, and also you will place 6 trains here, again 1 for each color in the game, but these trains do not represent actual trains. They'll be moved on this track here to represent the value of each company. So if, for example, the yellow train on this track here is on the space number 5, it means that each stock in that company, the yellow company, is worth 5 points. Setup. This is the setup for the board, which is very easy. Then there is another element of setup, which is a veritable pain in the neck. You will dump all of the trains in the game in this bag here. There really is a lot of them. Then each player will draw a number of these trains and will place them behind their screen. Each player has a screen which also has some reminders about the game printed behind it. Very neat. The problem is that after you have done that, you dump all of the trains from the bag on the table, and then you have to separate them by color, and also you have to somewhat organize them. You have boards here that you can use. For example, you can place all of the yellow trains on that one, all of the red trains on that one per square. And this is important because knowing how many trains are left in each color is key to the functioning of the game. Really annoying, absolutely annoying, because you're excited to play the game, you got your trains behind your screen, and now there is this thing that you need to sort out before you can actually play the game. And you need to sort them out carefully this time. The way we do it before the game starts, pretty much we just separate them into big piles, and then as the first player takes their turn, then another player simply starts separating them, and so on and so forth. So basically the non-active players actually organize them. Separated we do at the beginning, but the non-active players organize them on the board because again, it's very important to know how many are left in each column. And you cannot even set up the game in advance. Well, my friends are coming, I don't want to go through this annoying stage. I'll simply set up the game in advance, because it's very important the players do not know what the other players have drawn during setup. They do not know what are the initial trains behind the screen. So, alas, you have to go through it as your friends are already there and at the beginning of each game. Once setup is done, however, gameplay is very simple, very intuitive, and I can tell already I enjoy it. Alas, I may have spoiled part of my conclusions, but I find this game to be very enjoyable, which is kind of important to keep in mind, so it makes the annoyance of the setup with it. During your turn, you can take one of two actions. It is that simple. Actually, it's not that you can take one of the actions. You must take one of those two actions. You may not pass. One action is to build track. That is, you choose a color, which is a type of train of a certain color, and you take trains from the board of that color, and you take a number between 1 and 5. And then you place them on the board. Basically, the action is to build track. When you're building track, you need to place new trains adjacent to other trains of the same color. For example, suppose that here I'm building purple tracks. And there are a couple of restrictions. For example, within a city there can be only one type of train, whereas in the countryside you can have up to 2 trains in the same axis, but you can never have 2 trains of the same color. So you may have other railroads intersecting one of the railroads, but again, only outside of towns. I don't even know that makes much sense, but those are the elements, those are the pieces that I'm putting on the board to show you. So as you build track, as you can see, you will connect cities. The more cities you connect with a color, the higher is the value of that company, of the company of that color. For example, this round I connected 2 cities with the purple trains, and I connected white cities, whose name is within a white area. So that's 1 point there and 1 point there, because white cities are worth 1 point. That means that after I build track, I adjust the value of that company here. I take the purple company and I raise the value of the company by 2. Suppose that then the next turn I or someone else, because the companies do not belong to any specific player, I or someone else build track there. Now the purple company has a white and a purple city that are being connected. White is still worth 1, purple is worth 2, so now the value of the purple company has gone down by 3. 1, 2, and 3. And so on and so forth. So as you're building tracks, you're trying to increase the value of certain companies, or are you? It's also possible to try to sabotage companies that the players have invested a lot in, but in any case, players most likely, in most cases, will connect cities and increase the value of the companies. And as you see certain companies gaining value, maybe you will want to start doing trades. So the trains that you have behind your screen, although it's the same piece that you're using on the board, when a piece is behind your screen, it doesn't represent an actual train, it represents stocks that you have in a company. So instead of building tracks, the other action that you may take is to trade, in which case you take a locomotive from behind your screen and you place it on the corresponding board that we mentioned earlier, the board for that color, and then you may take 1 or 2 locomotives from one different locomotive storing board. Complicated way of saying I'm going to return a red to take 1 or 2 yellow, 1 or 2 purple, or 1 or 2 brown, etc., etc. So you're playing here a delicate game of balance in which you're trying to increase the value of companies that you have. You're keeping an eye out on what the up-and-coming companies are going to be, and you're trying to get stock in those companies before everybody else gets the same idea. There is a maximum number of locomotives you can have behind your screen, that is, of stocks that you can have in a certain company. That's very important, because if you go past that, you'll get a penalty at the end of the game, and that means that if some companies become very powerful when you're ready or full, you cannot get any new ones. That can be, well, a problem. But these are the 2 basic ideas. You build track, or you trade a locomotive from behind your screen for 1 or 2 other locomotives of a single other color. You continue like this until the end of the game. The end of the game is triggered when there are locomotives left in only one of the locomotive storing boards, so they're all exhausted but one, or when you connect Marseille with a train. These two different end game really affects seems like a negative thing. They really influence the way the game goes, because there can be a pretty much sudden death. If somebody starts building like crazy from Paris to Marseille, the game can be pretty quick. But of course, that doesn't mean that the person will win. It just means that when the players realize what's going on, they're just going to start to invest a lot in that company, and the player has been building, so the player maybe doesn't have a lot of stock in that company. It may also be the players who want to manipulate things because they don't want the game to end, so they will start bidding like crazy in the company that's getting close to it, but they simply use resources in other directions. So by the time that the Marseillaise guide absolutely wants to end the game, the time the player gets to go again, there are no trains left in that company. So there are ways of ending the game early, there are ways of preventing that from happening, and if you do not have an end of the game triggered by that, then it gets again to building in a lot of different directions. Then the game can be longer, will last long, but it doesn't overstay its welcome. But I like the fact that the game may end pretty suddenly and pretty quickly, but there are still ways for the players to control whether or not that actually occurs. Or you may play a longer game with a longer architecture, more like middle, half, and late game with a different structure. Either way, you continue till the end of the game, and then players will score points based on the locomotives that they have behind the screen. Each will be worth a number of points equal to the value of the corresponding company at that point. If this is the end of the game, each purple locomotive that I have will be worth 5 points, so this is what I have. Now I have 10 points here. Each yellow locomotive will be worth 6, each blue 8, and so on and so forth. So again, nice balance here between affecting the value of the companies and making sure that you have the stocks representing the most successful companies. At the end of the game, the player with the most points is quite obviously the winner of the game. I definitely enjoy the Paris Connection when played with regular gamers. It is pretty much an extended filler, definitely something that is a more relaxed experience from other types of more demanding games, but yet it still has a couple of interesting decisions. It still has a couple of interesting wrinkles here and there. Again, very simple, very linear, with very basic concepts. Try to get the things that are gonna be valuable, but of course everybody else is gonna try to do the same thing, so it is about doing it a little earlier, a little better, a little more efficiently. It is sometimes about playing a little bit cutthroat in trying to damage some companies, preventing them from connecting to many cities, etc., etc., etc. So you have that element of investing and a little bit of cutthroat that you have in many train games, but not nearly at the level of other games in the genre. Not nearly as convoluted, as cutthroat as, for example, 18xx games. And it may be heretical to compare the two, but of course this to me seemed a simplified, enormously, vastly simplified version of games such as 1830, the 18xx games that came out after that one. That's a huge genre in train games. GMT released 1846 recently. It's a big trend in games. I play several of them, and I'm not a big fan of the system. If you don't know the system, this is a fairly convoluted, advanced system in which you do not control this or that company. You're an investor and you're buying stocks in several companies. Sometimes you control a company, sometimes you don't. And there are just several nasty things that you can do as you manipulate the market and you're hoping for certain companies to fail or to succeed. So you have to keep track of the stock market element. There is a spatial puzzle as tracks are built on the board. I know that at the end of 18 exit games, after those like 10-12 hours that it takes us to play the game, no, that's not that much, but not even that much shorter. These are fairly long games. I know that at the end of those games, I'm usually curled up in a corner and crying with my friends patting me on the back. So it's not really the type of game that works for me. I admire 18xx games in general for hardcore gamers. It just doesn't look like my small cute Italian brain is wired in such a way that can really appreciate and enjoy these games. But Paris Connection seems to take the basic idea of these games, that being a player is about being an investor, is about playing the stock market, about trains rather than being a train company, and shapes this idea in a form that I can actually play, that I find enjoyable. Not only that, but I can even play it with non-gamers. I played this game with people that do not usually play hobby games, and they enjoyed it. It was absolutely approachable from the terms of rules, complexity, the strategy that came out, the interactions. It's really fun to actually see members of a family going against each other and doing these things that that have more strategy and more depth than they had seen with other games that they played, such as Stratego, Yahtzee, and those other type of market games, and then created some interesting interactions there. I myself enjoyed it. Again, if I were to play it with hobby gamers, it would be as a warm-up game, as an extended filler, but as a gateway game, to me, this is a great game. I'm happy that I purchased it, although again, it was a little bit by chance. I'm taking a bit of a risk for a game that I didn't know about. Again, finally, luckily enough for me, the economic investment wasn't big. And I'm really glad that I have it, because now I have in my collection another gateway game. When I'm too tired of playing Ticket to Ride, when I'm too tired of playing Pandemic and I want to introduce people to the hobby, then I have Paris Connection. That can be another great option. In general, it's a great alternative to 18xx games. Although, again, in general, these days I simply don't play them. It's not like if people invite me to play the game, I need to find an excuse, I need to find an alternative. I simply say, sorry, that's not my kind of stuff. But if I ever, for whatever weird reason, I feel the need to get that 18xx itch scratched, I guess I get that itch every like 20-30 years, but that one time when I want to play a game sort of like that one, then I will have Paris Connection that will offer me the opportunity for a game that has sort of like that general idea, playable in a much more approachable, in a much more enjoyable way. Again, at least for me. The only limitation I can see here is the fact that setup is a little bit of a pain in the neck, but not too bad, absolutely doable. The bigger problem, bigger limitation is in the fact that that the game is absolutely non-playable by anybody who has a challenge, in color recognition. I guess that if you like the game, then you can use a marker, you can use such sort of things to mark the different trains, different colors with sort of symbols, so that they are not coded only by color. I guess you can do that with your own copy. And it may be worth it, because I really think that this is a game that is a solid, nice filler, solid, nice introductory gateway game, and I hope that actually it gets more recognition. I hope that my video will help it put in some of my viewers' radar. Give it a try. If you're looking for a simple extended filler, if you're looking for another gateway game for a collection, then Paris Connection definitely could be a good option, because I find it to be very simple, mind you, very simple, very basic, very linear, but also very solid and very enjoyable gateway game.